In the previous video, we learned how to build tracks from export structure that we set up in our export manager. And we also learned how to build tracks from export tags for shots that may have been exported from, say, Nuke Studio or even Hero. In this video, I'm going to show you how to automatically generate comp scripts for each of these shots in our timeline. And before we get started, I'm just going to delete this track here. We don't need that. All right, I'm going to fit this to our screen here by pressing F on the keyboard. At this point, we have our timeline set up to give us a pretty good idea of what's going on in this sequence. We've added some assets in, we've added some timeline source effects to transfer over to comp. So now we can take all of our shots within our sequence here and create comp scripts for each of them. When it comes to automatically generating a Nuke script from your timeline shots, you have a couple of different options. If I select a shot like this, right click, choose effects, and you can see that we have Create Comp Special. Before we do any of those, let's actually revisit our project settings. So go to Project, Edit Settings, and check the Export tab. So when you're using Create Comp, it's going to follow these rules you have set in your project settings. It'll create a track name named VFX, or we can call this comps if we want. Then it's going to export those comps, so those comp scripts, to the project directory by default, or you can choose a custom directory where you want to point those to. For now, I'll just leave this on project directory. Then it's also going to process any shots you have selected using the shot template from the export manager, the basic Nuke shot with annotations. Okay, let's close that out. Keep that in mind. Now, if we're just doing one-off shots that we want to create pretty quickly without having to worry about the settings and just knowing that they're based off of those rules we looked at under the project settings, we can just select all the tracks that we want included into our comp script, right-click, choose effects, and create comp. Now, this is only going to work when you're doing one shot at a time. So when we do that, it's asking, do you want to create a single comp for all shots or a separate comp for each of the selected shots? Well, of course, we want all of these included in the same comp script, so we're going to leave that as a single comp. And then we're also going to use the plates track as our base, or the top of our tree. Let's hit OK. We'll double click that comp it created on our comp track. It'll pop us into our Nuke node graph. As you can see here. Let me just split this off so we can take a look at what's going on with that. So if we look at what was generated in our comp script for us, you can see a backdrop was created. Each of these backdrops are named based off the track name that we had selected. Within the backdrop, we have the name of the shot that we're using. And then we have the asset itself. Additionally, any kind of timeline effects that were added onto these shots are also included in here as well. As you can see, we got our transforms, our grades. It's already set a new clip range for us based off of our timeline. And then it's also merged these over based off our blending track settings. At the bottom of it, created a write node for us. The write node contains the destination path of where it's going to be written to already for us. And then if there were any annotations in it, it has an annotation node here that we can view, and we'll be able to see those annotations on screen as well. Now let's say you have multiple shots that you want to create a comp for. So what we can do is just, let's go back to our timeline over here. Let's select this shot and press Shift and click on this to select all the rest of them in that track. What we can do now is right click, Effects, Create Comp Special. Like I said, Create Comp itself wouldn't work this way just because it has all these additional tracks above it and we have multiple shots selected. We're going to want to use Create Comp Special. And then rather than using this basic Nuke shot with annotations, let's just copy that or duplicate it so we can create our own. And we'll rename it to Create Comp or whatever you would like. Currently directed to our project group folder, which is fine. More importantly, let's check out our Nuke project file. So in here, we'll be able to, if there's any retiming on any of the shots here, include the retiming method. We can set it to none if we don't want to include that and just leave it strictly for the timeline. But we have the option of motion blending, frame blending, or just a blend between these two. So the motion one's going to take a little bit longer to process, but you'll get better results. The frame one is going to just blend between the frames, nearest frame basically, and it'll be a little bit quicker, but it won't be as accurate. And then blending is going to be a little bit somewhere in between when it comes to as far as processing time and results. If there are any tracks that have soft effects on it, you can choose to include those effects or just leave those on the timeline if you want. And then we can change or reformat our plates if we want to do that too, to the sequence resolution or any custom resolution we'd like. Do that at plate resolution. Now when it comes to making sure that you include the rest of the tracks that should be included for that shot, this is the area you want to be looking at. We have collate shot timings, basically means that any other shots that share the same timing as the one you have selected are going to be included into the comp script that you're creating. So that's going to, except for this one right here, that's going to include this, and then also our reference track, because they're all share the same timings. Now, if there's two items on the same track with the same shot name, you want to include those, then you'd use collate shot name. But because we're just trying to, make sure we have all the same tracks above with the same timing, we're just going to use that one. And by default, it's going to create a comp script for us without any of these tracks connected to the main pipe. So we want to make sure we turn on connect tracks so that everything's merged together and connected. And now we have the option to include additional nodes that we may not have placed on here. Those additional nodes can be included into the comp script automatically by adding this. So click on additional nodes, we'll do edit. Looks like I already have one in there. Basically what it does is, if I were to, let's back out of this real quick. Save that template, yes, that's fine. Say we create a transform T on the keyboard, a grade G, and then blur B. We take these nodes, select, press Ctrl C to copy those. And then going back into our timeline, back to create comp special, we look at that additional nodes here. Make sure we're on this right one, create comp there. So I would just basically take that, copy and paste it into here, just like so. Now I can apply these additional nodes to every shot that's going to be included in there, to every track, to the sequence of it, or just leave them unconnected off to the side, or just not include them at all. So for now, let's just leave those unconnected off to the side. I'm going to hit OK on that. Before we write out, I don't think we really need the reference track in here, so I'm going to not include the reference track in the comp script. You can also filter this out even further by selecting which tag shots you want to include in there. Let's go ahead and leave that open so that we include everything. Maybe one last thing, we'll change the start frame from source to custom so that way everything starts at 1001 for our comps. All right, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and create comp. We'll save that export template, yes. Once again, it's asking a single comp for all the selected shots, which would give us one solid comp across the entire sequence, which is something that we don't want to do. So we actually want a separate comp for each of the shots we have selected. Okay. So now it's automatically generated a comp script for each of these shots we had selected here. So we can double click any of these shots and we'll be able to open them up directly in the NukeX node graph here. Now they're currently set to red because there hasn't been a render for any of these done yet. So once we render, this will start turning green. For now, let's just open up this particular shot here. We'll discard the one that's currently open. Don't want to save anything on there. And then we can see once again how it's automatically generated the backdrops for us based off of our track names and as well as our shot names. It's connected everything together for us with merge nodes based off of our track blending options over here. And then here, it's actually placed in our additional nodes off to the side for us. We can use that if it's a separate tool set, then we can plug it in wherever we need to use that. Otherwise, if we chose like the shot option, it would automatically include it under the shot here, or under the track, or under the whole entire sequence. What we'll do with this one is, let's make a grade on it. We'll actually view through it first, make sure we're viewing through this right here, which is what we're looking at in the viewer here. We'll add a grade at the very bottom of this. And we'll just change the grade on that slightly. Like that. And we'll go ahead and save a new comp version of this. So it versioned up for us to version 2. Now what I can do is I can either choose to write it out from here. If I go to render, it's going to render it directly to the timeline for me. If I'm in the timeline already, I can right click on this and do render comp. and it's going to kick off a render for me. Automatically opens up the background renders. You can see it's kind of a yellowish color here while that's processing. Once that's done, it'll be green. We'll have a comp render in place of the Nuke comp script. Now that it's finished rendering, we can take a look at that. So it looks like I actually just rendered out the first version, or version 1 of this comp, rather than the one that we graded over here. So if I want to do that, I can just go to the new version here, press V on the keyboard, select the version 2, and then I can render this out from here. I can do render comp if I want to do it this way. Or what we could do is, while we're in the node graph itself, if we want it to start rendering as soon as we hit save, what we can do is go to our preferences, Shift S on the keyboard, and then we're going to go down to that's in processes, and you can see here a section called background renders. So don't auto start background renders is what was currently set for us, or we can start background renders on a comp save, or we can start background renders on comp save or version change. So I'm going to select this one. Before I do, actually, let's just go back and select our previous version on this. Rather than pressing V on the keyboard and selecting the version I want, I can also use Alt and then up or down arrows to change versions. So I'm pressing Alt on the keyboard, press down, select the version before that. Okay. So now let's go back to our preferences and choose Start Background Renders on Comp Save or Version Change. Hit OK. So if I were to save it in the comp script here, or if I change the version like I'm going to do now, it's going to start automatically rendering for us. So I'm going to hit Alt up arrow key for the next version, and you can see now it's starting to process that. It's loaded it into my background renders window. So we can see the status of that as it is rendering. And then as it comes into view here, when that is rendered to that point where the playhead was at, we can begin to see it in our viewer, even though it's not completely finished rendering, until it actually turns green there. Now it's a full render on that version, so we have 2 versions available in our viewer now. Press V on the keyboard, we can see we have both of those in there. So in this video, we learned about creating comps and create comp specials, and how the create comp is driven by the default project settings or export. We also learned about some of the custom settings inside of create comp special when it comes to the Nuke project file, and how you're going to include or exclude any of the timing or effects you may have placed on the timeline, and whether you want to include the tracks that are associated with that shot. So in the next video, we're going to talk about versioning system. Now that we kind of ended this one with versions, we'll get a little bit more in detail with some version functions.